I have probably more content that I can cover today, so I'll ask them a few questions to kind of like target the presentation, and we'll have some time for discussion as well, because this is an idea that I had to talk about, and I've got some thoughts in here, some that apply to everybody, some that specifically apply to testers, but I really want you guys to be able to participate when I ask a few questions and just share your thoughts, because this is kind of like a little bit of a thought experiment too about what might be helpful, because I've asked people questions about effective time techniques, and they've just shared a variety of different things. So I'll look for some insights. So my name is Jess Lancaster, along with James Fogarty. We're founders of the Lansing Area Software Testers, and we've been doing this meetup for a little over 5 years. We're thankful that you came out to be with us here today. Just a couple of housekeeping things real quick. Drinks are across the hall. There's pop and coffee and waters and flavored things, so if you need something, feel free to go there. Bathrooms are to either side of the entrance to this room or around the corner to the left. Well, left and then right. There's bigger bathrooms. So it kind of takes care of a few of the housekeeping things. So we'll kind of go ahead and get into the topic, effective time management for testers. So I was looking for some inspirational quote that I could kick this off with, and I came up with this one: "Time is a storm in which we are all lost." I thought, oh, doesn't that just like really capture the way that we feel about time management? Because you know, when I talk to people, they're like, I'm a victim of my calendar. I don't know what to do. You know, I've got too many meetings. I've got all these other things. And I just felt like this quote really captured the way that I oftentimes feel about it. Because if you're anything like me, you've tried a variety of different methods, different techniques, tools, other things, and you still can encounter challenges. So I want to kind of check some assumptions. So I want to ask people, like, what is your biggest challenge? What are your biggest challenges with time management? So this is where I need some audience participation. So what are your biggest challenges with time management? Just raise your hand, throw them up, and we'll go through. Overloaded commitments, okay. Too many? Okay. Prioritization, okay. Too big of a list of things to do. Okay, so meetings, which oftentimes we assume are not work, right? Because we've got work to do and that meeting is getting in the way of our work. Okay, yeah. Time zones, okay. I do not have anything related to time zones in my list, but that's actually a really good thought.
Working remotely.
Yeah.
Some concern sometimes.
Yeah. That's definitely an interesting area to ponder, and some of the challenges that are related to that, and especially oftentimes it's like, how much time do we waste like getting an online meeting like set up and ready to go? Because like we could be in different conference rooms and you get in there and you can't log into this, or you don't have that password, or other things like that too. So yeah, there could be a lot of challenges associated with that. Anybody else? Okay, keeping your things organized, right? Okay, yep, very familiar with that challenge. That's a big one. Anybody else?
Building questions that aren't part of the sprint.
Okay, questions that aren't part of the sprint, so dealing with certain aspects of interruptions or unplanned work. Mm-hmm. Okay, there's this whole big category of like unplanned work that comes up. All right. Well, let's get into some discussion around those items a little bit more. So a few years ago, I did a time management presentation at TechSmith. We had this internal conference called EvCon, which some people here that are from TechSmith may remember. And I surveyed 160 employees here. So you have a variety of technology workers talking about their biggest challenges with time management. So their answers were too much to do, prioritizing that work. My items are all over the place. Like, in other words, like the work that I have to do comes from a variety of different sources or are in different places. And that could be anything from well, my team uses a Trello board, but I personally use this project board, and I've got my to-do list, and my email tells me to do things, and my boss tells me to do things, and like it can come from a variety of sources. So most people were like, I've got stuff all over the place, and that's a big challenge. And the last one was getting it done. And then there was a few other items that just were random, that didn't kind of fit in any category in particular. So those kind of biggest areas of prioritizing items are all over the place and getting it done, in addition to too much to do, are just things that you all were talking about. So it's good to see that those themes transcend just our organization, and other people have those problems too. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about myths and truths from about time management. And there was a site called Liquid Planner that has a project management utility, and they did this thing about myths and truths about time management. And so I want to kind of share some of these because I think it helps set our frame of mind. So the first one, myth number one, there's a magical finish line where everything is done once and for all. That's a myth, okay? You have to be okay with the fact that you are never going to be done. You know, I really oftentimes envy my friends that are in construction because they'll be like, hey, we're putting a roof on a house, and you know where you're at any given time and when it's done. But it's totally more difficult and challenging for knowledge workers. It really is. The truth is, lose the idea that all your tasks will ever be finished, and you got to prioritize, right? Like that's the truth. Myth number two, making a to-do list will make you more productive. Okay. My lists have lists, okay? I am a compulsive list maker, and sometimes it makes me feel better to make a list, but then all of a sudden I feel overwhelmed once I make it. The truth is that to-do lists in and of themselves do nothing to further a project or a task. They are, in fact, only intentions rather than scheduled commitments. So a list is you making some sort of like future intentions of what you want to accomplish. Number three, don't be distracted by emails, calls, or sudden deadlines. So that's a myth, right? But these are indisputable parts of today's working world, even if you call them distractions. It really does minimize the importance of those being collaborative work. So instead, think of them as obligations. So you're saying like, hey, people are trying to interrupt the work that I've got to get done, but it's still work, it's still important in some way. And so how do you actually like prioritize and allow for those things, because they're not going to go away. I mean, more and more we are working in collaborative teams. Agile is all about collaboration, so there are going to be more interruptions. I mean, we moved away from oftentimes like offices being separated on our own to in cubicles to open workspaces or collaborative team rooms and that kind of stuff. So this notion that getting interruptions is somehow impeding your work, it can impede parts of your work, but we can talk about some techniques on what you can do to kind of improve the aspect of your like collaboration, but also having some time to yourself to get some stuff done. Myth number four, a perfect time management system exists. That is not true. I better stop this. Do not restart. What's that? If I close it, is it still going to restart though?
I'm saying if you can't read it, you can look down by your hand, the screen's right there.
And I just don't want to restart it now.
Yep, that's what it's doing. There's nothing you can do. It's going to restart when it decides to restart.
Okay, well hopefully lunch will be here by the time it does, but it's like not.
Slide the window up so it's not blocking anything. There you go.
All right, well, the funny thing about it is I restarted the computer right before the presentation, so I don't know why it's wanting to restart again. All right, undivided focus is king, myth number 5. The truth is creativity and productivity respond best to routine, which is usually, we don't think about it that way, but the best way to achieve larger goals is to break them up into manageable pieces and complete those tasks, on a schedule. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but I've just found scheduling work is very helpful, and we'll have a few items that we can kind of discuss further related to that. So here's a big question for you. Are software testers different from other roles? Like, let's just think about like developers, people in IT, even HR. Our HR team like works in sprints, and it kind of may seem a little bit odd for HR to do something like that, but they pull in sprint commitments and that kind of stuff and do a daily scrum and go over their items just like other teams do. So I guess my question is are testers different from other roles? What do you think? No? So I got a no. No. Anybody say yes? Somebody.
I mean, kinda like, on my team, I'm a shared resource, whereas people I work with aren't.
Okay.
But
So,
other than that,
so you're
I
working
divide my
with,
time among,
yeah, 5 other people, and you're in a single role, and say the devs aren't. So, yeah, I can understand it'd be a little bit different there. I said maybe not. I don't think so, and probably not, but there's this notion of work flowing. So this kind of gets to what Mark is saying is oftentimes you could have a developer that would be doing work on their own to work on a feature, and maybe they're doing that by themselves. But as a tester, you could be the tester for multiple developers that could have stuff coming at you different times, and that role could be fundamentally somewhat different than what the developers are doing. But everyone has planned and unplanned activities, so our goal must be how to best manage the realities of our job role. So we've got to look for ways to best manage our particular job role, because you could still have testers, some people could still be working in organizations that are doing a waterfall development method. Some could be using Scrum. Some could be using, like we do, Scaled Agile framework here that has aspects of Lean, Kanban, Scrum, just various other Agile methodologies all wrapped up in one. And planning is different in the way that you organize. So you may have realities that you have to treat in your own environment that may be particular for you. So let's put all that behind us, like the discussion, the research, the thoughts, all those things, and let's kind of talk a little bit more about like some ideas and some solutions. So when I think about techniques, I learned this phrase years ago: "A fool with a tool is still a fool." So we talk a lot about this when we testing tools back in the day, that people say, oh, you got to use this tool, or this one tool will rule them all. This will solve all of our problems. It'll be our silver bullet, if you've ever heard that term. But it's when it comes to time management, tools can help you be more effective. However, it's the techniques that you're going to apply that are going to be more important. So there's a variety of tools out there. There's day planners. There's, anybody remember Franklin planners? I had one of those. Those things were kind of expensive, and I could never get myself to adopt the whole system. And I know people still use those, but for me, it was like I'd buy the tool, and I would feel so good, like I got this tool. Okay?
Find out.
Okay, here we go. Man, this thing is really causing me some problems here. All right. Hopefully I'll get to a stopping point, and lunch will be here in a few minutes, and then I can go ahead and reboot that. But the point is that you need to focus on techniques and not necessarily tools. Okay, I bought a new planner, one that is like a quarterly planner, a year ago. And it's still sitting there with nothing written in it. I wrote my name in it. But you know why I didn't fill it out? Because it's intimidating. Because I feel like I want to use this new tool, which has techniques in it. It's got a habit tracker. It's got a lot of cool things in there. But frankly, it kind of terrifies me a little bit to invest my whole life into this new planner. And like, is it going to help me be more productive? And yeah, I still debate. It's kind of funny because I was talking with a friend here, and I just said, she's like, hey, have you started using your planner yet? And I said, no, it's just so intimidating. I just look at it and I'm like, do you know how much time it's going to take me to take my stuff from my existing system and to put it into this thing? And this thing doesn't just manage my work. It's more of like a life planner. It's work and outside of work. And that's a big commitment. So I think sometimes these things can be intimidating, but I think what I found value in is the techniques that you apply can cause about change. Those small techniques can help you more than just grabbing onto some new tool. All right. So how do you effectively manage the time that you have during the day? This is a question. How do you effectively manage the time that you have during the day? Anybody got an answer? Yes.
You could set off calendar appointments ahead of time to make sure that people people don't schedule meetings so you can focus on a specific task.
Yes, an offensive and a defensive posture, right? Protecting your calendar time. That's a good idea.
Microsoft actually just started doing that. Like their software, they're like, hey, we noticed that you're losing focus time. Do you want to schedule some focus time?
Yeah.
And you just like select like 2-hour blocks. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, yeah. And then someone like contacted me later and was like, oh, I saw you had a meeting, so I didn't bother you.
Yeah. It's like a defensive position to protect some of your time. And in lots of organizations, that can be very helpful to do that. Yeah. Anybody else got any other ideas?
I really needed something that I just sign myself out of like the corporate chat essentially, so
Okay.
I can't be contacted, but usually you have to get some sort of approval to do that.
Yeah, but I guess, yeah, that's the question is like, are people okay with that if that's a method? Like,
Depends on the situation.
yeah. Yeah, it's interesting here. We have a lot of devs here that, I mean, years ago, people started just turning their phones in. They're like, I got a phone on my desk and I never use it. People started turning their phones in. Now, if you want to get a hold of them, you've got to walk over to their desk or use a chat program or something like that. And so people are expected to be on the chat program. Yeah. What do I got on here? There's a lot of methods and best practices for how to effectively manage your time. Don't fall for the line that there's only one best way. People have different personalities. They have different ways of what can work better for them. So don't fall for the line that says, hey, there's just one best way to manage your time. Multiple techniques are usually needed to be effective. And find out what works for you and then master that. But there's some central core components to time management and what can make you most effective. So that would be these three areas. Which relates to the research that I did in interviewing people and asking them, and it was like, oh, I've got too much to do. I don't know what I should do first, and I don't necessarily know how best to get it done and kind of work on that. So centralizing your tasks, prioritizing them, and getting them done. So those are like the real three big areas that we'll kind of take a few minutes here to dive into. So take control of your tasks. So you can have things like bugs, you got to log them, you got to retest them, you got to deal with them at various testing tasks, you got team backlog things, you got email coming at you, you could have phone calls to return, you could have appointments to set up. All these kinds of things come up, and they can be in various different areas, right? Work comes from a lot of different areas. So you've got to find a way to centralize your tasks. Now, there may be some tasks that are different and hard to centralize. For example, I don't try to take things like responding to an email and making that a task on my task list. Now, if I got to have conversations, if it's going to become a bigger work item, then it probably will become a task on my list. But if it's just responding to an email, I leave that in the email system and I flag that I need to take care of that. And when I schedule or make that time for email and batch that work, then I do it during that time. So I think it's a way of kind of trying to manage those things from being regular interruptions, but centralize to the best of your ability. Try to get your tasks in one place. That will help you prioritize, because if they're all over the place, like if you have work on a Trello board and you're like, well, I don't know what all I got to do on there. I've got my own work list. I'm getting these other tasks. If it's not centralized, then you really can't be able to prioritize that work. So I'll talk about this in a little bit more, but this is like my task list. I use the Eisenhower Matrix, and I'll talk to you guys a little bit more about what this is, but you can see I've got tasks in different quadrants on here, and this is how I centralize, okay? And it is a piece of paper, okay? It is not a fancy planner. It's something I can take to meetings with me. Every couple of days I rewrite it and reprioritize. I'm constantly reprioritizing, but I use it regularly for centralizing the primary tasks that I have to get done. But I'm not going to take like responding to an email and other things like that into that. I'm leaving that in that system and just scheduling the time to do that. So centralizing and taking control of those tasks. Prioritizing, yeah, seriously, the unexpected is going to happen every day. I walk in every morning, I sit down, I take a look at my meetings for the day, I look at my task list, I review that, and I mentally prepare for what do I got to do today. sometimes something could have happened overnight, or some new meeting showed up on my calendar, and I need to reprioritize things. It's a constant thing that you've got to do all the time. And I can't be upset when new things happen. Just the other day, I think it was, Tuesday, I took Monday off, and I had snow plowed some meetings into Tuesday and Wednesday because I needed to move them because I was off on Monday. And so I'm looking at my calendar later on Monday evening thinking about what's tomorrow going to bring and what am I going to do and how's everything going to work. And I see an hour-and-a-half meeting by my boss got put on at 9 o'clock on Tuesday morning going till 10:30 over top of other meetings. And I could have just sat there and gotten frustrated and irritated about that, but it's an important discussion that we, about some work stuff that we had to do. And I just had to reprioritize. I had to respond to that. Right? And you all have things like that come up, and you've got to reprioritize. So it's looking, okay, what do I need to shift? What do I need to move around? And just deal with that. So as I said, regular work tasks come in from all places. So for me in particular, I've got stuff from my boss. I've got work coming in, tasks from email, coworkers. I've got 2 team backlogs. I've got a QA leadership backlog of things I got to work on. I'm also responsible for our build and config management team. So I've got product owner and scrum master for that team too. So I've got work that I got to manage there and work on that board that I got to work with that team on. But if I have key things that I need to get done in those areas, that stuff goes on my list, right? Because I don't want to lose sight of what I've got to prioritize and centralize those tasks in that list. So the unexpected is going to happen daily, and we've got to prioritize. And the third one is get it done. So you got to be the boss of your calendar. And I think a few people brought that up. You've got to tell your calendar what you're doing and not just let your calendar tell you what you're doing. I have regular conversations with people leaders here and people that work for me around reevaluating their meetings. What meetings are you going to? Do you have to go to that meeting? Could somebody else go to that meeting, right? Because sometimes you become a victim of your calendar, and your calendar tells you what you have to do all the time, but you're not telling it what's important. And sometimes I think that it can be a healthy thing to say no to certain meetings or give somebody else an opportunity to go to it, or it could be a leadership opportunity for somebody. I was just talking with a lead the other day about, why are you going to the bug triages all the time? Well, they expect me to be there. Well, isn't there somebody on the team that's really good at helping with those bug triages, and can't they run them? Do you have to? Can you grow skill in that person? Can you further remove yourself from being a dependency for that task to happen? And think about it from that perspective. So bossing your calendar on, you've got to tell your calendar what to do. And so Microsoft is now helping us out by saying, hey, you looks like you need more focus time. Do you want to schedule some time, right? You're in a lot of meetings, right? You should be working on the things that are important to you. It's kind of funny that software programs are telling us that now. And apparently, I have to restart the computer, so we will pause for station identification. If anybody needs a drink, you can go get one while this thing restarts. But give me more. Well, I should say, hey, is there any questions while this is automatically doing its thing? I haven't gotten into the specific stuff that testers can do. We're still at some of the general stuff, but do you have any questions so far?
I guess I have a comment.
Sure.
I don't know if you need me to speak into the mic or.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
I know that in certain roles, and not necessarily on a dev team like most of us are, I've had experiences where staggering work times actually usually can work from having interruptions. That's something that I did at a employer forever ago, but having less people working at the same time caused less interruptions, which was kind of interesting. It was something that I thought we should try, and I think they did it after I left the company because they never listen to you while you're there. But yeah, it seemed like it worked for them, which was kind of cool. I mean, I think one of the interruptions we were having a lot of is just people bouncing ideas off of each other, which is good, but then it interrupts you from the work you're trying to do. So that was something I experienced, which is kind of a different take on how to, limit some of the interruptions.
Yeah, I think that can help. I worked at a software company one time years ago that one of their methods was they scheduled a 2-hour block in the morning and a 2-hour block in the afternoon that was like heads down time, and it was expected that you were just able to do your work during that time. And I thought that was helpful. It may have prevented some people from getting answers to questions that they needed to move, if they needed to move along, but most people could wait, you know, an hour, hour and a half to get an answer.
Have a lot of people that are new that need to work, then you're kind of stuck working for the same hours all day.
The staggered work hours is interesting. I mean, we kind of have that by default a little bit here, where people have some flexibility in being able to schedule their start and end times and working with our manager around that. And so sometimes you'll see people come in, you know, I think people start as early as 6:30, you know, and other people may start as late as, you know, 9 or something like that. So you definitely can see some benefits of getting that heads down time doing that. One of the transitions that I made was I started coming in at 7:30, and which is totally like, that's like an anti-pattern for me, because I am not, I've always viewed myself as not being a morning person until I just decided, well, what if I went to bed earlier at night? And then I started doing that, and I'm fine now, so. Okay, we'll see how long this takes to load up. I wanted to use my own laptop to do this presentation, and James is like, hey, yeah, you need to use the computer that's up there so we can record the screen. What is going on? All right, let me try this again. We can't get food, we can't present. We are just in rough shape here today, aren't we?
You plan this so we can see how we manage our time.
Yes. Oh, there we go. All right. Okay. Yeah, I think we're back. We're back in action. All right. So, yeah, we talked about centralize, prioritize, and get it done, bossing your calendar around. So, yeah, just to kind of close that thought out, one of the more effective people I know is a person that's in project management and has done it for a number of years. And this person I know, like when you look at their calendar, it is like almost totally like booked up. There's like little tiny gaps of time here and there, because I know the person like schedules work activities during that. They have a lot of meetings, but they also schedule work time in there and in chunks and blocks. And I've talked with them about it, and it just seems to work really, really well. And so I've tried to adapt to doing more of that. And I think it can be really effective to protect your time, and you also feel like you're not constantly getting interruptions. Like I scheduled time on Friday afternoon to work on something, a 2-hour block, and somebody was trying to schedule a meeting, and they said, hey, I see you have something booked, but you wanted to do this meeting this week. Can we do it during this time? And I said, yeah, I'll make adjustments, for that. And so I think it's just like taking control a little bit more of the time that you do have and throwing some things on a schedule, even though you can get some of those interruptions. So there are ways I think that you can deal with that by if you get permission to kind of go heads down or whatever you need to do, like turn off chat or something else, or just let people know I'm trying to test something, or I'm trying to work on something or get this completed, and working on things in smaller chunks, I think can be helpful. So we have a couple of techniques, we'll talk about that. So let's before I get into some general overall techniques, I wanted to make sure that I had time to address stuff that was specific to software testers. So things for testers only. So what ideas do you have for time management, and what has worked for you if you're in a role of a software tester? What things have you done that you think have been more effective for you that kind of help you through your testing and tasks? Specifically from a testing perspective. I've got some ideas, but I want to hear yours. Go ahead.
Well, I'm a lead, so it's a little bit of a different workflow, but I've got a Kanban board that I live by.
Okay. Like personal Kanban? Like your own board. Okay, awesome.
Sprint things don't really go into that, because that's just regular work that I expect to do with every other task that goes into that.
Okay. What's been the biggest challenge with running a Kanban board on your own?
I tend to throw more things in the backlog that I tackle, and
Yeah.
every once in a while I just kind of have to go through that list and just throw some things out that either don't matter anymore,
Yeah.
or I'm just not going to get to them. But
Yeah.
overall, it's actually working really well for me.
I'm really glad to hear that. I use a personal Kanban board for years, and then I just felt like I was accumulating too many things in there, and I had used both a digital one in Trello and then used James actually kind of made a laminated version of one, and I was using that with sticky notes because I just like to handwrite. I just prefer that. So that can definitely be challenging, but I had the same problem with the Kanban board, is I'd get so many things in there, and I wouldn't reevaluate that as much as I do rewriting this, every couple of days. And my favorite column on this little sheet happens to be the don't do column, because things end up going into the don't do column, and I'm forced to reconcile that every time I rewrite this. Like, what do I have on my list that I need to say no to? And previously, my lists I would feel bad getting rid of something, but now I got a column for it, right? It's going somewhere. Any other ideas of things that has worked for you?
Just asking for reprioritization. Yes, asking for reprioritization. So sometimes there's like 20 things on the board, and so I know I can't get to everything by the end of the day. So I just ask the leads on, hey, I can't get 20 things done today. What do you want me to work on first? And then my list of things to do becomes so much shorter, and I don't feel as pressured. So I feel like I can actually get more done than had I just had that full list of 20 things and going, oh my God, there's so much to do.
Yeah. There's almost always going to be too much to do, right?
Yeah.
I mean, especially, this is the challenge with when you're in testing, is that there's this notion, if you've ever done any calculations related to being able to test, even a dialog box, the combinatorial explosion that you get of the possibilities of what you can test is just you can't complete it in multiple lifetimes. A single dialog box, you could not possibly manually test all of the permutations. It's just not possible. And so you're confronted with this, what am I not going to do continually? And so you have to make those decisions, which is why prioritization is key. And getting input from other people can certainly be helpful, but is there a way to kind of take that to the next level and you prioritize and start to understand what those people would prioritize, and then you maybe don't have to ask as much? I don't know.
I'm still new.
Okay, all right. I don't know how long you've been there, so just if you, it's getting to a point where you're able to not need as much input in weight, right? Because from a lean perspective, we want to reduce waste. We want to reduce waste in our processes. We want to reduce waste in our time. So looking at some lean methods can really be helpful to tighten things up, and I'll talk about a few of those. All right, so the first one I want to talk about for testers specifically, has anybody ever heard of session-based test management? besides me and Mark? Okay. So this is one that you may be doing and not know what it's called, or you may not be doing it and you should check into it. But session-based test management's been around since the year 2000. James Bach, Jonathan Bach, Michael Bolton, some other ones in exploratory testing field and context-driven testing came up with creating a charter of what you're going to test and scheduling sessions to do the testing, whether it's a 45, 60, 75, 90-minute long sessions. You wouldn't really want to go any longer than that. But you basically identify a charter, like what is the purpose of what you're going to test, where's your area of focus, and then you do an exploratory testing session, essentially. But you're scheduling that in a session. So oftentimes in these sessions, you would just work through just doing the testing and then like write out the list of items that you need to follow up on, whether it's logging bugs, doing other things like after your session. But it gives you the heads down focus time where you're scheduling blocks of time to do focus testing. So what you can do is you can go out to satisfice.com or just Google session-based test management. You're going to find YouTube videos. You're going to find charter template examples like this one right here. There's articles out there that'll really help you. But essentially, as I said, you identify a charter, what area you're going to cover, what guardrails do you have on that, who's going to do it, break down the tasks you're going to cover, and then start taking notes of what you're going to test. And that can be incredibly helpful. Identify additional risks. Maybe that'll spawn other test sessions later on. But it allows you to go heads down for a particular amount of time, focused on a particular mission of what you're going to test. So you could even do a test session and say, hey, I'm going to spend the next hour retesting bugs, and I'm going to commit that hour to retesting the bugs that have been returned. And then I got to move on to something else, but I'm scheduling that regular time to pay down those bug retesting or whatever else you need to do. So I would encourage people to look at session-based test management to organize. There's this aspect of like when you're managing your testing and what you're going to test and how you're going to test it, using some lean test management techniques. And one of them is Matz, minimal essential test strategy. So I've got a friend Greg Pascal, that is a UI and test automation director for Dave Ramsey's company. And he created this test grid, basically, that allows you to identify the category or area of things that you want to cover, and then critical, high, medium, and low things that you would test in those areas. So you could build a little matrix out for some area that you wanted to test, and let's say this one has like text and printing and security. So let's just say it's like a document management system type thing. So he's got items that are critical, high, medium, and low in this grid. And some product owner or somebody comes to you and says, hey, the dev just made a change in our document system, and we need to ship it by today at 5. There's customers that are waiting for it. And you're like, oh my goodness, I mean, it would take us 5 days to regression test this. And so then you can enter into some sort of negotiation. You can say, well, if I just hit the critical items, we could get that done by 5 o'clock today. Product owner, are you okay with that? And you give them the opportunity to make that decision, and you can share with them, well, if we don't cover these things in general, this is what we're going to miss. But what level do you want us to cover, and share a recommendation or thoughts and ideas with them. So it gives you an opportunity to kind of work on what's the nature of the change, what do you need to cover for regression, and what's most critical aspects of the system that you're covering. And just be able to have that conversation and kind of organize things in that way. So Greg has like lots of stuff available on his website at metztesting.com. There's videos out there. This has also been added to the ASTQB standard for testing qualifications related things, certification. So it's actually gotten some traction within the industry and has been added as a test strategy tool. So I think it works really good when you're trying to do some really lean test strategy management. And we'll make these slides available. You guys don't feel like you have to write everything down, so you can kind of get in here and cover this stuff. So that's a really good option for lean test management. So here's another one. This may be controversial, but what about not logging all the bugs? Okay. Yeah, oh, I see some scared faces out there. So yeah, I did say that. Don't log all the bugs, and I'll tell you what I mean about that. here's my disclaimer. Don't go back to work and say there's a guy at TechSmith that said we don't have to log our bugs anymore. But go back and say we need to ensure that our bug process is lean and it doesn't accumulate bug debt. Okay, so have that conversation. So what do I mean by that? So I'll give you an analogy, like a tale of two stories of bugs. So years ago in one of our products, we had, I don't know, somewhere on the order of 1,000 bugs in the bug database. And the team was never going to get to that. And they just carried that debt, and it was just overhead, and it weighed on the team, and they felt bad about it. And then they would say, well, which one? Let's just go through, testers, go through and figure out which ones are still legitimate. Go through and retest these. And you're like, you want people to retest 1,000 bugs? What? Who's got time for that? No, we don't have time for that. So people went through and said, okay, let's just look at the critical ones and go through. Well, this team eventually went through the process of closing a lot of those out that they knew they were never going to fix. And they had been prioritized so low, it's like those items on your list, like you need to make a decision, don't do, right? We're okay with this being in the product. The customers seem to be okay with it too because nobody's complaining about it. So why is it just hanging around there as debt if nobody's ever going to get to it? Because you're always working on new features and reprioritizing things. So on this one team, they went through the process of closing them out and got themselves down to an under 50 backlog that was manageable for the team. Yes?
What about logging them and closing them as won't do? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Logging them and closing them as like a record?
Yeah.
You could do that, but I guess I would kind of ask is like, what is the value of what that's going to provide in the future? Is it going to be like, well, we found this before? Because if you were doing a session-based test charter and you noted that as an item that you found, but you had a discussion with people and decided not to log it, I mean, that's going to be a record somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's if you do like session-based testing, where that's kind of like a thing that you can write down. It's more like
it's
in
testing
6
notes,
months,
right?
Yeah.
Essentially, is what you have.
Yeah. So it's like in 6 months, somebody comes down the line and is like, oh no, there's this bug. We're like, well, we decided 6 months ago not to do it.
Yeah. I mean, this is my point is that if you made a note of that somewhere and you remembered it, right, that you could kind of go back to that. I mean, it wouldn't have to be logged in a system somewhere for some audit track record that nobody's going to want to look at, and somebody's going to search and find, hey, we brought this up 3 years ago, and it sounds like it's more of a problem. If it resurfaces and it becomes a priority, then you can deal with it then, right? I mean, how much value is there really when you're having the conversation about whether to fix it or not? We knew about this 3 years ago, but somebody decided not to do anything about it. So you're going to have a conversation about not deciding to do something. See what I'm saying? Like where I'm going with this? It's like try to be lean with it. So if you're a tester that's working on an agile team and you're working really closely with a developer and they check some code in and you decide you're going to do some testing on that feature, you do some testing and you have a conversation with that person, these are the things that I found, this is what I feel like is more important, and you make the decisions of what to fix together, and then there's something that comes out there, it's like, no, look, we need to deal with this in the next sprint or the sprint after, let's put a bug in or a ticket or something like that at that point, as opposed to the old school style of, I found all of these bugs. Okay, I did a test session and I found 19 bugs. I'm going to spend the entire afternoon logging and documenting all of these, then go back to have a conversation with somebody that says they don't want to fix 3/4 of those. So that's waste, right? So what I'm saying is maybe revisit that process a little bit and have those conversations about those issues as opposed to logging them. And I even do this when I jump out of my management role and into a tester role and I find issues, right? And the old man still got it, right? He comes out and he does some testing and I find some issues and I sit down with a tester on that team and cover those issues and they say, no, we've already talked about this one, we're not going to do that. We should probably do something about this one. Then they go have a conversation with the dev and discuss that amongst the team, and the team is making those decisions, but not in isolation, right? They've got feedback they're sharing with each other. So bugs can be a huge part of the work that you do on a daily basis, but if you're spending a ton of time just changing statuses and moving things around, like that seems like busy work that doesn't have as much value as finding the most important bugs that people care about and the team working on those and keeping your focus on those. So I've even seen some teams go to daily 15-minute bug triages with just triaging certain bugs that are coming in and having discussions around them rather than having hour and a half long, twice a week bug triages that they're slogging through things. And, so just how do you make that routine and that whole process provide more value? Any thoughts on that idea?
One thing that we do, one of the things that we do is when we are communicating bugs that we find to the devs, we'll often try to estimate the impact or scope of that particular bug on our clients, essentially. So in doing that, we kind of give them a heads up, like this is a wide or relatively narrow impact. And a lot of the times, if it's narrow, we're not necessarily going to hit on every exact thing.
Yeah.
We're going to say, we found this. Here's the broad strokes of what's going on. If you don't feel like this needs to be corrected immediately, just close it out, and that's fine.
Yeah.
We have another process or a workaround or something that we can implement, or people just aren't reporting it, and we only have this one case.
Yeah. And so we had, when we were working through this process of doing what we referred to as bug bankruptcy, which was bankrupting those bugs, that big long list, though, that like 900 and some bugs that the team went through and bankrupted, there was like half of the team was like, we can't delete these bugs because they're historical information. And half the team was like, we should delete these bugs because we don't need this information if we're not going to do it. And so the team said, well, okay, let's just try to appease the people that really don't want to miss out on that information if that thing comes back again. So they ended up just closing those issues and leaving them in the database because if somebody wanted to search for something, there was some perceived historical value. I'd really like to kind of check back and ask, like, are people really finding value still in that? The only way that I would find value in that is knowing if somebody decided not to do something with the thing and I want to log it again and bring it back up. Like I've had those things come up, and when I search the database, I can see there's a closed issue on that, and it's like, we decided not to do this. I'm like, okay, I'm not logging it again. Why? Somebody made a decision that's not important. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting way to kind of treat that. So think about lean bug processes, and that should lighten your work, because I really like having a conversation about a bug as opposed to spending time documenting all the details on it and then somebody not caring about it.
How would you handle prioritization? Because for our team specifically, they use the bugs to track like how many people requested the fix for that backlog that hasn't. Sorry.
So you're saying, how would you handle that for prioritization if you're tracking like how many people care about a particular thing? That's kind of an interesting use for it. For us, the way that we've kind of dealt with that is there's a ticketing system that like our support department has, and they give us like top 10, right? They'll give us details on like a top 10 for a product or an area, and just kind of say these are the biggest issues we're seeing, whether it's a crash report or problems with a feature or something like that. So we just kind of get that trending type information from them. So I don't really think we wouldn't see that as much in our ticketing system. But so you're saying that in the bugs they're recording.
Yeah, so it's shared between the ticketing system and our backlog. It's just one list of bugs.
Okay.
Some client reports the issue, it gets logged inside the bug saying, hey, it was reported this many times. And that's used for prioritization.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if there's like a business need for it that you want to use it like that, then I can kind of see where that would provide some value. Maybe interesting to kind of investigate and see if there are other ways to kind of handle that, such as having a one of our teams years ago called it, I think it was called the Legion of Doom, and that was like the top bugs, and they had faces and stuff like that too. So and it was like let's focus on the top 10 issues rather than this list of like 800 of bugs that we know about that 750 of them nobody really cares about that much. All right, so let's talk about a few techniques for everyone. We talked a little bit about this. I think I actually had this slide earlier, so I'll just move on to techniques that apply generally to everyone. So this is what I'm currently using, the Eisenhower Matrix from President Eisenhower that came up with this format, right? Do first, schedule, delegate, and don't do format. So this, you may have seen this as the urgent and important matrix. So this would be things that are urgent down here and things that are important. And then it would be, wait, hold on a second. I always get this messed up when I don't have them on the slide, right? It's important. Wait, no, important. Anyway, important and urgent, not, this is not important, not urgent down here, okay? This is why you don't do these things, because this is not important, not urgent. So these are the things that you don't want to do. If it's important, but it's not urgent, this is the stuff that you want to schedule, right? It's like, I don't have to do this necessarily today, but it's something I need to get done, so I'll look at scheduling that. Do first, these are both important and urgent. Like, for example, if my boss comes to me and says, hey, we're going to finish something related to, I don't know, raises for people, right? I could be like, well, let me schedule that in a few weeks. But, you know, that may be urgent because I need to get him information, and it may be important to the people that are getting raises or something, you know. So that might be something that, like, this is really important. I got to get this information. It's time sensitive, compliance related things, other things where I got to get this stuff done today. So that's stuff I want to focus on. And then delegate is, so what things seem to have some urgency to them, but they're not really that important. And it says delegate to others, but we all know sometimes we don't have people working for us, right? So we can't delegate that to other people, right? I'm not going to just like, hey, I don't feel like this thing is, you know, very important to me. It's urgent, needs to get done. I'm not just going to always pass that stuff on to an employee or a coworker or something like that. So I think delegate is an interesting one. And this category is probably a little bit more challenging for many of us, because it's like, is there a task that we don't have to do? And this is where I was getting at, talking with one of my leads about, are there meetings that could be an opportunity for somebody else that you don't necessarily need to go to? Are these things learning opportunities? I had one of my leads that I had a task on my list to review and revise job descriptions a while back. And I had a lead that I was talking to them, like I said, this is what's on my task list. Is there anything you're interested in? They're like, oh, I'd really like to work with you on doing revisions to job descriptions. And I was like, cool. I didn't have a timetable, one that had to be done, it needed to be done, but that was an opportunity to collaborate with somebody on some work that they were interested in, was a growing opportunity for them, but also I didn't have to do all the work myself, and it helped get that task completed. So I like this matrix because if I use it, you can use it on a daily basis, you can use it on a weekly basis. I tend to rewrite mine every couple days because I feel like things don't change that much from day to day, and I can there's spaces on there where I can kind of reprioritize things. So I really like this. If you go out to eisenhower.me, you can see more about this. There's video tutorials and stuff. But again, I love the don't do column. This forces me to get things on my calendar when I review this list, so I like that. Because I used to just have a long to-do list, and I'd try to rank things in priority, but I didn't have a mental framework for taking stuff off the list, getting help with things, putting things on my calendar, and what do I need to get done right now. I felt like everything was always in this category, right? And then that gives you that anxiety over all the stuff you got to do. All right, has anybody used a bullet journal? Anybody in the past used a bullet journal? Also called a bujo. You can, if you just Google bullet journal, you can read a little bit more about them, but essentially it's basically where you index a to-do list, and you basically can have stuff you got to do for the future, stuff you have to do for the month, and then stuff that you're got to work on for today, and then you basically use bullet points, whether prioritization, identifying things as events or tasks, those types of things, and you can just use an empty blank notebook and start organizing your stuff in a bullet journal format, and that can be really helpful to also manage your activities. I used a bullet journal for probably a year and a half, and I thought it was pretty good, but I just wasn't as good about doing the future log and the monthly log, I pretty much was doing like a weekly log and rather than daily. And I wanted something to help me with, rather than identifying things as tasks and events and just one priority, to break things down a little bit more. So I moved to the Eisenhower Matrix. And that's been going good. Personal Kanban, yep, you mentioned that. These can be really, really helpful. And when you use digital boards like Trello, you can like do all kinds of categorization and things like that. But for me, that's just, I don't know, personally, ain't nobody got time for that. When I was doing personal Kanban, I was using just small sticky notes on a little laminated board that James made for me. So it was pretty cool to use that. But then all of a sudden, you know, the stickiness wears off one that's been on there for I don't know how long, and you're like, where'd that task go, right? And it just, I had lost some tasks, and
You had an actual board and just used my desk.
yeah, you could do it on your desk too, yeah, and put the sticky notes and organize them, yeah. Yep, definitely could do that. The important thing about personal Kanban and the value that it brings is, first of all, it helps you visualize your work, so you get tasks in certain areas. And the other important thing is limiting your work in progress. So if you're able to make sure that you're not pulling in like 5 things to do at once, it can really help you do that. Well, I think it works for bigger things, bigger projects that you can break down into smaller tasks and organize that. My problem was I felt like as a person that had lots of inputs that needed to schedule time for things, it's almost like you'd have to adjust that board like every 20 minutes to a half hour. I would feel like you'd have to, if you really broke things down and were using it properly and had smaller tasks. So for me, I felt like I had so many things in flight and meetings and scheduled time to work on things that a list worked better than trying to keep up with moving things around as much as I personally needed to. Like, I think they work really well for teams and visualizing the work, but I struggled a little bit with the personal Kanban and the task list. Anybody heard of a Pomodoro Technique? Okay, we got a few people here. So this is taking a task that you'd like to get done, whether it's big or small, and scheduling a 25-minute time frame, making an oath to yourself that I will spend the next 25 minutes focused on this particular task, and then I will take a 5-minute break, and then I will start another cycle. And the guy that actually created this even came up with, I think it's this guy, Francis Cosarello. He actually came up with this like little tomato timer, which is, you know, Pomodoro is Italian for tomato, and so he's got this tomato timer set for 25 minutes that you could get and set it, and then when it bings, then you can go and take a break. But it's a technique that you can use for a 25-minute heads down. I'm not going to do any distractions. I'm not going to check my cell phone. I'm not going to do anything else. I'm going to spend the next 25 minutes, and you can just continually reset that for scheduled time blocks and pick a task and focus on that. I did a little bit of reading into some of this stuff, and when you're talking about scheduling time for things, there's this notion of challenges of what's referred to as like half work, where you get something partially done and then you leave it and you walk away to something else, and you leave that item half done, and then the context switching that you have to do to go back to it to get it finished. It is a whole lot better to just try to break things down into really manageable chunks and scheduling your time for that. So sometimes I'll do this where I'll just set aside the time and, hey, I want to go heads down for 25 minutes or do a couple of blocks and take a short break in between. And that can be helpful in having those small chunks. Like, hey, I'm going to get the next half hour, I'm going to get as many bugs retested as I can and be, you know, heads down and focused on that. All right, so that was all of the content that I had that I wanted to cover. Any questions, comments that anybody wants to share before we go ahead and wrap this up for today? Yes.
So just a comment. Have you ever heard of, I think, Time Euler?
What is it?
Time Euler. It's like
Time
Timular, I think. It's like, and it doesn't really help with the time management per se, but they have an application that you can get, and you can create rows for different tasks that you may do, and then you can actually set a timer and click and start and stop as you do it throughout the day. And then they also have a little I don't even know what shape, how many sides it has, but it's like basically a big die that has a battery in it. And so you take it off its little stand and you put it on the side that you're doing that task, because you can actually write on it a little bit.
Oh, okay.
And say, hey, I'm going to do, you know, test planning for this amount of time, and you put it down, and then as soon as you're done or you get interrupted or whatever the case may be, you can pick it up and put it back on the stand. And so you're like actually applying like your time and actually seeing kind of where it's getting divided. You can actually hook it up to Jira too, and other boards and products where it'll actually just put the time to that thing if you integrate it correctly.
Yeah.
But I have played around with that a little bit. It's kind of interesting because then you really see where your time is going sometimes, and it can be a little bit scary. But like the little die, I think costs like $100 or something like that. It might be a little bit less, but then they charge you like a little monthly fee for being able to use that integration. Otherwise, you can just use the app and manually click, the little buttons for each task. But it's kind of an interesting thing that kind of goes along with this.
Yeah, that would be a really neat and interesting thing to try. One of the things that is not exactly like that, but time journaling or doing a time audit could be really helpful for people to do, like take 2 or 3 days and sit down and just like keep a running log of how you're spending your time, and the meetings or other things, and look for waste, right? Look for distractions, look for other things that you're doing to kind of overcome challenges of productivity. And I would say don't try to make, like for me, it was like a huge change, like trying to go to a whole new planner system. And I was like, well, what problem am I really trying to solve? Well, really, I wanted to better categorize my priorities and that kind of stuff. So I did move to another like lightweight system, because for me, it's like, I can't get on these bigger complex systems. I'm just not that, it doesn't work really for me. But that's an interesting thing to try. Kind of keeping an eye on your time. Yeah, anybody else have any thoughts, suggestions, questions? Go ahead.
Are there any tools that are actually kind of already made? I know some of them you talked about, but like maybe for like the Eisenhower chart, is there actually like a journal already made with pages like that, or do you have to manually go like to FedEx Kinko's and like copy a bunch of those pages and make your own little notebook if you feel like it?
Yeah, so it's so funny that you mentioned that, because so on the Eisenhower.me site, they have this like PDF that you print, and I print out a bunch of these, and I've just been using these on my desk and just stacking them up as I go through them. But then I thought I added this category up here at the top called the 10-min win is what I call it. These are my 10-minute wins, like things that don't really go on this chart, that are like easy tasks that I need to get done, that if I find myself getting out of a meeting early, I don't want to start something else if I have to go to another meeting. So what are these things that I can get done? So it's funny that you mentioned that, because I started thinking, man, I need to talk with one of our designers here and just start to build my own time management system and like have them design something up for me, because I feel like I'm getting to that point where I'm not finding something that works the best for me, but I want pieces of different things. Yeah.
I did find a few of the like won't do and like time charts for I can't remember. It's one company that makes a whole bunch of them. They're like won't do, and ain't nobody got time for that, and thank you notes where it's like you like fill in check boxes, or like make like give somebody like make you feel better, like here's your like appreciation, and it has little check boxes, or like if it doesn't work, hug it out, like you like little check boxes and things like that. But they make a whole series on some of those like organization things, and I think they have one where they have the 4 corners where you can do it, and it's just like a thick notepad that you can just tear off.
Yeah, that sounds like a really neat way to do it, because I've often thought about too that there's like, this is just for work, and so I leave this on my desk and I know what I've got to do. But if I was to move to one that was more life planning, like I want to like a habit tracker in there for certain things that I want to do on a daily basis, if it's more encompassing of my life, and like if you're being intentional about practicing gratitude, right? Like I have this item that kicks off every morning at 7:45 on my drive, or well 7:15 on my drive in, and it's like what are you thankful for today? And so I spend like a moment thinking about gratitude, right? And I feel like that helps put me in a positive mindset for the day. But I want more of that stuff incorporated into not just time management, but a little bit more life management, you know? And I see that more and more in planners and things organized. But I feel like every time I look at these planners, I'm like, well, there's things I don't like about them. So I have thought about just like designing my own, but I feel like I'd mess it up. I don't know. All right, I think that's all we have time for today. Thanks, everybody. We'll be hanging out here for a few minutes if you want to talk. There's probably a little more pizza if you want to grab some before you head out, but thanks for coming today.